Sugidama blog. Sugidama blog.
Hey everyone, welcome to the episode 16 of Sugidama podcast, the podcast about Japanese sake, the drink which uses magic to turn rice into alcohol with the help of a microorganism called Koji. And today we are going to talk about it with Akemi Yokoyama, a Japanese chef and cookery teacher who lives in London. But before I introduce our guest, let me tell you about our sponsor, London Sake, who have one of the widest selection of premium and craft sake available online today. You can choose from over 100 sake from 25 breweries, and they will deliver across the UK and many European markets. And if you don't know what sake to choose, you can use simple online tasting notes, together with very sensible and affordable food pairings to help you decide. What's more, you can get a 10% discount by just using the code SUGIDAMA, all caps, during checkout. London Sake, making sake simple. Another thing I probably should do is to introduce myself in case it's the first episode of Sugidama podcast you have started listening to. My name is Alex and I live in London. I am a certified sake specialist. I did an international kikesakisha course and a sake advocate. Besides this podcast, I have Sugidama blog where I write about sake, publish tasting notes and overviews, information about sake events happening in London. Well, this section is not particularly populated at the moment, but I'm sure will be in a month or two. So last time I was talking about rice, and I wonder if you tried to compare sake made from different varieties of rice. Which one did you like more? Any other sake discoveries? Please let me know. Send me email or tag me on Instagram or Twitter. Now, let me introduce Akemi, who I met a few times at various sake events which were on the rise just before COVID, and surely will resume after the social distancing becomes less strict. She's a chef, cookery teacher specialized in authentic Japanese cooking, and also a Koji specialist. The best person to talk about the topic of this episode. But above all, Akemi is an amazingly interesting person. So let's dive into this incredible subject of Koji. Hello Akemi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
It's very nice to see you. I think we met in person probably a couple of times.
I'm sure we did.
Yeah, I remember it was this sake family Christmas party. I definitely remember.
Oh yes,
Yeah,
I was actually half of the time I was in the kitchen.
I
making
know
something.
that. Yeah,
But eventually I came out.
yeah, yeah, and probably a couple of other events in London, sake related. Okay, so we are going to talk about Koji, and because it's a series of episodes about sake ingredients, and Koji obviously it's the magic ingredient for sake. But before that, can you just talk about what you do? What is your connection with sake, Koji, and things like that? It's quite interesting.
Okay, so I am basically a chef, but I don't work for the work in restaurant. I do private services to private family or anyone who wants me to come and cook for them.
Right.
I'm there, and I also teach Japanese cookery. And I am a certified Koji making advisor, which is actually a relatively new qualification. So basically, I was working a lot with sake industry people through my work, through my cooking predominantly. Then I acquired my sake qualification in WSCT, sake level 3. That was, I think it was probably 4 or 5 years ago, which really, really deepened my understanding of how sake is made. So following that, my activities with sake industries, in sake promotion, collaborating with lots of sake people, with my food increased. So that was a kind of natural progression for me. then I started studying towards my Koji making advisor qualification at the beginning of last year. So the course is run by the Koji Academy in Japan, and the guy behind this is Nakaji. Nakaji has published a very good introduction to Koji book called Koji for Life.
All right, yeah.
That was last year. So it's all about how you can actually make Koji at home very easily without fancy equipment. So that was, that's pretty much is my basis of where I am.
Right.
And for the Nakaji, a bit about Nakaji. So Nakaji used to be a kurabito, head kurabito, a person who's leading a team of sake makers in one brewery in Terada Honke. Terada Honke is one of those very, very old-fashioned sake breweries in, I think it was Nara. So they're not adding any artificial stuff.
Yeah.
So they're making Bodaimoto sake, and they're using the ambient yeast, and they're using ambient lactic acid bacteria. So he
very
knows
natural.
a lot. Oh yes, unbelievable wealth of knowledge. So that's how it started.
Okay. And so what is because I ask everybody about that, what was your sake, sort of how you first tried sake or something? Because I mean, with people who are non-Japanese, it's usually some kind of moment. Then they came somewhere and tried it. Usually it's like two stages. They first try something, they didn't like it, and then somebody gave them very good stuff and they liked it. With Japanese people, it's different because some Japanese people never tried it to some point and then tried it and it was a aha moment for them. For some Japanese people, it was more like a very natural progression. So what about you?
So I was brought up in very strict family. So my very first alcohol consumption was when I was 20. That's illegal.
Right. Yeah.
Legally allowed to consume alcohol at 20. Yeah. And sake was really very much a man's drink at the time. Salaryman is observed in yakitori bar sipping hot sake, and it's the kind of things that you go around with tokuri and ochoko, going around the table in onsen resort when you have party with colleagues. So you're talking about like 20, 30, 40, 50 people. So you go around just serving sake, and when you serve sake, you have to, it's an interactive social thing in Japan. So when you offer sake, that person has to offer it back. I am pretty certain that was one of those things, but I honestly do not remember what my sake experience was. The only thing I really, really vividly remember about my sake experience was around that time. So, people were drinking sake, not cold, but either hot or at room temperature. And I was drinking, we decided to drink sake and we were warming it. But those time, sake was kind of cheap and cheerful. So I had this huge bottle of Ishobin and we were warming it. We were drinking it like there's no tomorrow. And I had this absolutely horrendous headache on the following day. So that was my sake memory.
So it's more like a traditional sort of Japanese progression when you start drinking sake socially and
absolutely, yes. Okay. Absolutely.
So when you started drinking sake, did you like it, or it was like it was just alcohol? And
No, actually, I really, really appreciated the taste. But then again, because it wasn't a very good quality sake, it was more like a futushu or, low end of the sake, because that was the general sort of perception of sake, that you warm it up, particularly in winter, and, alcohol evaporates to an extent, and it keeps you warm. But I did really, really like hot sake.
Okay.
very, very much liked it. Not in large quantities.
No. All right. Moving to koji. So what is koji? What is this magical ingredient?
Yeah, so in sake makers, the most important thing is koji, and the second most important thing is koji, and the third most important thing is koji. So it is really, really important ingredients in sake making. Koji is basically a generic name for Aspergillus oryzae. It's a long name. It's a type of mold, and it's a national mold in Japan. So we call it kokukin. Koku is country, and the king is mold.
Oh.
It's in short, what it is when you say you're making koji, it actually means making enzymes.
All right.
That is the most important thing. So oryzae or koji mold is responsible for the fermentation of traditional Japanese condiments, beverages, miso, soy sauce, sake, vinegar, mirin, shochu. Everything is made with some sort of koji.
Right.
But when you say what is koji, it's slightly confusing because most of the time when we say koji in everyday life, it means some sort of grain inoculated with koji spores and fermented. So it's a product.
Yeah.
So rice koji, for instance, or soybean koji, or barley koji. But at the same time, people also refers to koji spores as koji. So you have to really listen very carefully which one they're talking about.
Yeah, it's very confusing. I found it very confusing at the beginning because you read about something and people write about like koji, and then you realize that talk about rice with koji mold on it. In different situations, they talk about the actual spores. And
You're so right. Even we are confused.
Yeah.
We can guess, but we are confused. But
Okay.
That's how it is now.
So you understand it by context usually what people mean when they talk about
I think
koji.
so.
Yeah.
Yes, I think
Okay.
so.
So do you know when did koji appear in Japan first?
Right. So I, as far as I know, koji concept, when people started making sake in Japan, I think the oldest record found is from 8th centuries, when Chinese sake sort of makers or some sort of rice alcohol makers were visiting Japan, and probably they introduced sake making to Japan. But even before that, people knew that you can actually you can make some sort of alcohol drink from rice, but they couldn't quite work it out why
Yeah.
it turned alcoholic. So that was the 8th century. And in 10th century, when sake making with koji was slightly more established, so people knew there's some sort of mold that is responsible for making something like sake. But then again, because they, unlike now, today we buy koji spores from koji merchant. But back then, people were actually taking the oryzae, Aspergillus oryzae, from the rice in paddy field. So they're naturally growing mold. It's one of the naturally growing mold on rice grains, but
Right.
it wasn't the only one. So some of them are harmful. Aspergillus oryzae isn't harmful, but there's some really nasty, like a green slimy kind of things.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly how it developed, but in terms of the history, a really, really interesting thing is that there were only one place in 13th century, it was one of the shrines in, you may know, one of the shrines in Kyoto called Iwashimizu Hachimangu or something. They became really, really powerful because they were the only establishment approved by the government as a koji supplier.
All right.
So sake breweries, they had to buy it or source it from them, but it wasn't really impossible to make koji rice. So they started making it. Rice merchants started making it, and this establishment, the shrine, became really angry. So they started protesting it to the government, and that has led to some kind of riot.
Oh, really? Because of Koji?
And yes, because of Koji War.
Yeah.
So in the end, in 15th century, the system has broken apart.
Yeah.
So that is when the first Koji merchant was born. And sake breweries was allowed to produce their own Koji rice.
Yeah.
So around that time, the quality of Koji was more established, stable, and they became really, really professional because I'm sure there were competitions as well.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Yeah, it's very interesting. So before we talk about what is the role Koji in alcohol making, what other products, what other foods are made with Koji?
So miso, soy sauce, mirin, vinegar, sake, shochu, what else? Loads. So basically the most important principal Japanese condiments and beverage drinks are made of koji.
Okay.
They cannot be made without.
So it's really sort of like national mold of Japan, which basically foundation of Japanese cuisine and
That's right. So that's why, it's not just sake and shochu. So that's why regionality has developed largely. So if you go to, places like a place like Nagoya, and their miso is dark and it's called hacho miso. It's only in very, very specific area in Nagoya they're produced, and they make miso just with soybean koji. And they don't, unlike any other miso, the most popular miso is made with rice, barley, you name it, and the mixture of rice, barley, and soybeans. But they are very different. And the miso soup they drink is made of that black, very intense red miso called hacho miso. And everything they cook with miso is dark miso taste. So very interesting.
Okay. So let's talk about the role of koji in sake making and shochu and awamori as well. So why use koji? What's the point of using koji?
Okay, and so making koji means making enzymes. So there are two very, very important. Well, they produce lots of enzymes, but there are two very, very important enzymes in sake production. One of them is amylase. The other one is protease. So amylase breaks down starch into sugar, which becomes the food for yeast for alcohol production. Yeah. And protein is converted into smaller amino acids that becomes ultimately umami, and also it is the source of a lot of complexities.
All right. Okay.
In sake, and it's a fascinating thing. I remember when I was reading some sort of books. In olden days, before sake was established as sake, made of koji, that was like 8th century or 7th century. Have you heard about kuchikami sake? Kuchikami sake is offering to the god in shrine.
Okay.
And people actually used to have rice, then spit into it.
Yeah.
And when it's mixed with water, because amylase is in your saliva,
Yeah.
so it starts breaking down starch into sugar.
It's like in this movie, it's Your Name.
Yeah. Yes. Something like that. So, but unlike that, Koji has that enormous power of producing those enzymes, and there are lots and lots of enzymes. Like a lipase, for instance, it breaks down fat. So should there be any fat on, there are some fat in rice.
Yeah.
It breaks it down and make it into something, something different. And so it is totally responsible for creating something that is so rich in umami, complexity, different aroma profiles, and so on and so forth. It is very important. And alcohol, production, very important.
So we take koji, we put it on the rice. Koji sort of releases these enzymes, which breaks starch into sugar, and then yeast takes sugar and makes alcohol and CO2 as a byproduct.
So basically, koji being a mold, it's alive. It needs to eat something to survive, and they want to multiply because they're a living creature.
Yeah.
So when they land on steamed rice, they look for moisture. They need water, they need oxygen, and they need nutrient.
Yeah.
So wherever they land, the spores land, if they find starch, they know they have to produce amylase. So they will produce amylase. And the starch is in the core, the center of the rice. Whereas on the outer layer of the rice, there's more protein.
Yeah.
So if it happens to land in there, then they know they have to produce protease to break down amino acid. What sake makers are so fantastic is that they know the characteristic of koji. So if you just imagine one piece of rice, they know the surface of the rice has to be drier than the inside of the rice. So that's why, the length of time they absorb the dried rice before they start steaming, and how they steam the rice, and how long they steam the rice.
Yeah.
And everything is relevant because it ultimately changes how steamed rice becomes. So depending on, like ginjo, daiginjo, the premium quality sake, if the sake breweries are trying to make high quality sake, they are trying to look for a sort of koji rice quality called tsukihaze. Tsukihaze basically is to skewer, sort of like, they try to inoculate the steamed rice with in dots rather than all over the surface.
Yeah.
So the difference it makes is that, in order to do that, they have to make sure that the surface of the rice is drier and the inside of the rice is more moist. So when it lands on the surface, the spores will start growing mycelia towards the inside of the rice grain where the starch is. So for the sake breweries, it is good because it means that they will produce more, glucose. Means that they have more sugar to convert into alcohol. And also for complex taste, complex aromas, they have to spend a long time melting it. So if koji becomes really rich with so much enzymes, as soon as it makes contact with water in morome, it will start digesting so quickly. It doesn't give the sake breweries time for slow fermentation.
I see.
So it happens and it finishes, no complexity. So that's why that's why it's so important to get it right. But my goodness, to get it right is so difficult.
It's amazing how they achieve that without, I guess, until recent times, they didn't know all these kind of details about Koji. They just knew that, okay, this is Koji, it grows like that. But obviously they didn't see this kind of on the micro level.
Yes, and lots of people who are new to sake puzzles why do we polish rice? To such an extent. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that some really high premium quality sake, the sake breweries don't really want so much protein outside, because that will convert sake in the rice into umami, because they want to create very pure, refined drink. And sake has a lot of, during the sort of during the production, sake has a lot of choices that sake makers have a lot of choices to choose that will make changes to the end product. For instance, filtering, how much filter, is it genshu, is it diluted, are you adding distilled alcohol, how long are you fermenting it for, what is the temperature. You can make so many changes to get it right to your own specification. So that's why they decided to just polish off the lots of protein. So what they're focusing is alcohol production in starch. And it's just so interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You mentioned mycelia. What is it?
So mycelia is like a root system, let's say, because just think of it as a plant. In order to grow, they have to grow in. They could grow into anywhere. But because they need water, the first thing they look for is water.
Yeah.
So they will try to grow mycelia, which is like root, like a branch, where they can sense water.
I see.
And when they find the moisture, that is where their sensor works in such a way that they know whether it's protein or starch. Then they secrete the appropriate enzyme to digest whatever they have in front of them.
Okay. So this expression when they say that the rice should be hard outside, soft inside, it's the important characteristic for Koji to grow properly on it, right?
Koji can grow all over the rice surface. Koji can also grow to the specific point, depending on how the Koji maker wants to control it.
I see.
So it all depends on what kind of, what you're making it for, what is the purpose of making Koji, what characteristic do you want to draw out of it. It all depends on that.
All right. Yeah.
But for Koji makers, I mean, like I make my Koji in my kitchen.
Yeah.
A fluffy Koji, like baby sort of what's the expression? It's almost like a baby sea lion. Really fluffy and soft, and I know it's not soft, but it looks soft and really fluffy. Lots of they look almost like flower bed. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Mesmerizing.
Okay. Are there different types of Koji? Because I heard that there are several types of Koji, and so what are they?
So they are in Japan. There are 3 types of Koji in Japan, and there are more Koji from like China, Southeast Asia. But in Japan we have yellow Koji, black Koji, and white Koji. white koji is sort of related to black koji, and they're both used for shochu making.
Okay.
Awamori is made specifically with black koji called Aspergillus awamori. But most sake, or pretty much most sake, is made with yellow koji. And can I just touch on that and how koji affect the taste of sake as well?
Definitely.
Just
Yeah,
a little bit into a little bit more into details. So let's just take an example of an amylase. Amylase digesting starch and make it into a glucose ultimately. So what koji does is by secreting amylase, there are a few types of amylase, they actually cut the starch molecules. So starch molecule is quite large, long, and they cut it in half. Then they will take scissors and cut in so many places and make it into much smaller molecules. So in human body, it is very healthy because they're doing the digestion for us outside of our body. So it's very very much kinder to our body. But at the same time, what it means is that depending on where it's cut and what they're making into, it could be oligosaccharide, it could be glucose, it could be other sugar. There's so many different types of sugar. So they are producing a lot of different types of sugar.
So it's not one type of sugar.
Sugar alone, not just one. So that is pretty much the same with protein cut into smaller molecules, becoming amino acid. So they create abundance of layers of different interesting flavor and taste profile within one sake to start with. So that's why it is so interesting. So that makes it more super interesting.
So it's basically depending on what type of sugar lot of dominates, it affects the taste and complexity of the sake.
And sake makers know what they want. So they will just specifically target the characteristic of what they want to achieve. I'm sure it's really difficult, but they're always trying to find the best solution.
I think that
never
that's
ends.
What makes sake such an amazing drink, because it requires such a skill to do that in the way you want to do that, to achieve the results you want. Which is amazing. Sort of it's like
it is amazing.
Somebody mentioned at a seminar or somewhere that wine is made by gods and sake is made by people, which is true.
That's true. That's true.
I think the topic of koji and sake making is so captivating. But let me remind you about London Sake, our sponsor, and their huge selection of sake, from 1 cup ozeki to ultra premium Nabishima Secret Black. Just have a look. Don't forget about the magic word Sugidama, all caps, to get your 10% discount. Back to our fascinating conversation with Akemi.
And I was talking about yellow koji being the dominant koji for sake making, but most recently some younger generation sake makers started experimenting with white koji, for instance. And white koji is very unique, and white koji, black koji, they're both the same family. They do similar things, but the only thing that they do, but yellow koji doesn't, is they produce citric acid.
I see.
So citric acid is like a lemon kind of sourness, and it is produced as a natural substance out of koji production. In shochu awamori making world, it is very, very important because shochu, aomori, they're both traditionally made in southern part of Japan, and humidity and the temperature is sky high.
Yeah.
So they need to, they really, it's very important for them to increase the acidity right at the beginning of the sake production in order to protect the sake from shochu from contaminations.
Yeah.
Whereas in sake making, traditional sake making, they normally use lactic acid bacteria. So they are actually trying to both impose a method. They are trying to increase the acidity
Yeah.
in moromi, but white koji, black koji is quite unique in that way.
So, do you know if they manage to produce sake using like white koji, or if they still small like experimenting?
They are sake. They are sake made with white koji, definitely. I have tasted some of them. They're slightly, obviously, slightly higher in acidity, very refreshing. But I think the last sake I had made with white koji was from Aramasa, and they were beautiful. But because Aramasa is a sake brewery who is always experimenting, always trying to go back to the basis of sake making hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
So they're refusing to use the sort of technology and trying to bring themselves back to the past.
Yeah.
They're still using technology, but they're actually trying to recreate something with the most traditional method, but using their accumulated knowledge and techniques and technology to make it something so interesting. So yes, I really like the use of white koji. I make white koji and make it into condiments, and I use it for cooking.
Okay. So for like a soy sauce, miso, is it also use the same yellow koji, or it's a different koji?
Yes, it is. As far as I know, most certainly all the entirely yellow koji.
Okay.
But it's not just one yellow koji. So basically, yellow koji equals Aspergillus oryzae. It's the name of the species for yellow koji, and then there are thousands of varieties.
I see.
Thousands, and they have completely different aroma and taste profile between them.
Okay.
And the koji merchant, they produce them, they blend them to sake manufacturers, sake breweries specification, because sake breweries are buying sake spores from koji merchant, koji spore merchant.
Yeah.
And they have very good intimate relationship, and sake breweries talk to the merchant, and they will tell them what characteristics they are looking for, the kind of behaviors they're trying to achieve from koji. So they talk, and then they will come up with idea of blend.
Yeah. It's
fascinating world.
It's such a fascinating, because you're thinking like, oh yeah, like it's just mold, it's a spores, but it's such a thing. So many things are involved, and it's blending and deciding. It's a lot of choices, which is it really makes it very interesting and very sort of, you think, okay, but they usually don't put any kind of character type of koji on the bottle or something. They usually just say koji. Yeah. Is it more like they try to keep it secret, or just they can't? It's not very.
No, I don't think so. And I was listening to the toji of a sake brewery called Itakura Shuzo. I don't think we have sake from Itakura Shuzo in the UK, unfortunately, but then the Toji there is so experimental,
Okay.
By just listening to him, it was just beyond belief fascination. So he said, it was not a long time ago, he said most sake breweries focus is on how to produce alcohol. Like I said, I was talking about it earlier on. Whereas in olden days, sake used to taste more like koji. So koji has a very, very distinctive taste and aroma profile, depending on the variety we are talking about. There's thousands, as I said. And what he's trying to do is he wants to make his sake taste like koji, which is very, fresh concept.
Yeah, it's quite interesting.
But he's not the only one. There, I'm sure, more sake breweries who's trying to achieve that. But he's quite particular. So everything he does is how best to bring the koji into sake. So for him, koji is everything. Koji is so important. But for most breweries, probably, end result is more important because they have specific ideas of how they, what kind of sake they want to make. And koji is just one of the jigsaw puzzle.
I see. Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting. Yeah. Okay, so we talked about koji in sake production. What is amazake?
Amazake?
Yeah.
Amazake is, there are two types of amazake. This is another really confusing fact.
Yeah.
So when you may have heard that amazake is actually quite popular in Japan, and the amazake that is popular in Japan is made of rice koji, water, and sometimes steamed rice. You can actually make amazake just with rice koji and water. Whereas another type of amazake is made from sake lees, so like sake leftover.
Yeah.
So they are alcoholic. Whereas the modern amazake, everyone is now talking about, is non-alcoholic.
I see. So it's also a fermented drink, but non-alcoholic.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, because from sake lees, there's a lots of alcohol that can still be very, and they normally add sugar to make it sweet.
Okay. Is it different from shirazake? Because I somewhere read that it's the same thing, but in other places it's some kind of distinction. Is it different things?
Okay, I think when you say shirazake, it's probably dobroku type, like a nigori sake, like a white sake.
I think shirazake, it's what drunk on this women's celebration or something.
Yes, that's amazake. So on the 3rd of March every year, we celebrate Girls' Day.
Okay.
And they normally serve amazake because it's it's not for adult. It is children's day.
I see. Okay.
Sometimes mom and dad consumes amazake made of sake lees, so it has a little bit of alcohol in it, or they can also make amazake from just koji, rice, and water. So it could be both. It could be both.
Okay. I see. So what is the nutritional and health benefits of amazake? Because, well, people are talking about fermented drinks nowadays. It's a lot of, if you look at UK, there are a lot of yogurt is probably an old thing. It's appeared in UK years ago. But for example, there is another milk drink called kefir, which is basically fermented milk as well, but it's very popular in Eastern Europe, became very, very popular. So amazake is also a fermented drink. So what are
the benefit is, generally, amazake is generally referred to as, in Japan, natural drip. So it has enormous amount of nutrients and vitamins. So it is a natural immunity booster.
All right.
Basically. So they're extremely rich in vitamin B group. So that maintains the skin, increase the energy metabolism, and lipase breaks down fat, so it's good for diet. And oligosaccharides and dietary fiber also helps the gut, well-being, keep them healthy.
Yeah.
And also, there has been a lot of coverage in UK press a couple of months ago about 5-ALA. It's a type of amino acid, and it was huge, media coverage. It's actually known to be effective in blocking the growth of COVID-19.
Oh, right. Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah, so that's all very interesting, isn't it? And also, because it's unlike the other type of amazake, which is made of sake leaves, we don't have to add any sugar because they're naturally sweet.
Because they're very sweet. Amazake, it's quite sweet.
Extremely sweet. In summer, when the fruit is really ripe and sweet, I only add amazake and make an ice cream or a sorbet out of it. No added sugar, and they're really, really quite sweet.
Yeah.
So it's extremely popular in Japan now.
So this sweetness, it comes not from like a sugar, but from different types of sugar, not just for like a refined sugar, which usually put in sugary drinks.
Yeah. So, rice, the core of the rice is starch. So basically, a sweetness comes from the starch that's broken down by an enzyme called amylase by the work of Koji, and which produces a lots of different types of like sugar, but naturally occurring sugar, which is very good for us.
Yeah. Okay. So can you make amazake at home? And how?
Yes,
I'm not
easy.
asking you for recipe, but
no, it's really, really, really easy. So basically, you need a rice koji, good quality rice koji, and you need. I normally use either Ziploc or bottle, or sometimes heat-resistant plastic like container. You have to clean it, sterilize it, pour boiling water over it. Just make sure that there's no other, there's no contamination. And then just make sure that whatever the vessel you're using isn't hot, because at 45 degrees, Koji potentially could commit suicide. Oh, so you don't want to kill them. Add some koji, like 100-gram koji, rice koji, and add just over 100% in weight of water. Tap water is fine. So if it's 100-gram koji, 120-gram water or 120 milliliter water, close the lid. And then in my case, I have a water bath, sous vide. I will heat it in water, hot, warm water of 58 degrees. So it has to be somewhere between 55 and just under 60. So enzyme works at its best. If it goes beyond 60, some of them stop working. And you're going to have to keep it there for 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours. And 6 hours is okay, but 8 hours for the better. And I also use oven. And I do exactly the same thing. Set the oven at 58 degrees, just leave it there for 8 hours. Or you can use yogurt maker. You can use...
I read that rice cookers are used for...
Rice cooker, yes. Rice cooker, add some water in the bowl, and leave the cover slightly open, because otherwise it gets too hot and the enzyme stops working. But basically, you have to keep the temperature within the range. That's 55 to 50, probably 9 or something. That's it. Simple.
And because I remember I was trying this amazake you made for the seminar, and obviously it's got like liquid and it's got rice grains still there. So you drink both, you consume both, and liquid and rice grain. Do you mix them?
You can.
You can.
Yeah, you can.
Because amazake I tried in Japan, it's just a smooth white liquid rather than.
Yes, ultimately, if you leave that amazake, which you can still see rice grains visibly, enzymes keep digesting rice, so you start seeing more liquid and less rice. But I think commercially available amazake, the manufacturers are, I'm sure, blending.
Okay.
To make it smooth.
Yeah.
And by all means, if you like that kind of textures, then I wouldn't hesitate to blend it.
Yeah.
And it will be so nice if you add a little bit of amazake with your morning, juice, fresh juice.
Yeah, which is pretty good.
おはよう。
I also heard about people making bread with koji.
Oh yes.
How do they do that?
Fascinating stuff.
I mean, bread, is it for what? Because I understand yeast and bread, obviously it makes it puffy and then you. But what is the role of koji in making bread?
Okay. So, koji attracts so many other things, like lactic acid bacteria is attracted to koji activities, and yeast is attracted to koji.
I see.
So if you make sake at home, like a dobroku, which can be made quite easily, you will be surprised just how wild the ambient yeast will become and try to push everything, and they form tremendous volume of bubbles. Unbelievable. So that's what it is basically. So you can make a bread starter with rice koji by feeding flour into the mixture, like a conventional sourdough.
Yeah.
But you don't have to do it. You can just make rice koji starter with steamed rice and water. Yeast will hack in anyway, naturally.
Yeah.
You cannot see it, but it just jumps in because they like it very much. So they start bubbling. They start bubbling, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
So, if you actually make a batch to start with for the first time, you have to be patient. You have to mix it every day, and maybe it takes 3 days, 4 days. It could take 7 days before yeast comes in and start bubbling and all that kind of things. But once it's established, you can actually keep the starter without flour in the fridge, and you only need to really feed it with another koji and rice, tiny amount of koji and rice once a week. And it keeps going. They're so strong, unbelievable. And when you want to make bread, just treat it as if it's a sourdough. So you add it to the flour, start kneading, and like as we say in sourdough bread, you have to be patient. It takes a long time to ferment.
Yeah.
So it's a whole day, if not 2 days affair.
Yeah.
But it makes a perfect bread, but it's not sour.
Yeah.
It's not sour, but it has a very nice kind of mochi-like texture, which is really, really nice.
I should try it myself because I make sourdough
should.
bread, but I should try to do it with koji and see how it goes.
Yeah, you definitely have to try it. I will send you a recipe later on.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
to make a starter.
Yeah.
To make a starter. And unlike sourdough, sourdough, if you don't feed it, it dies. It dies they never come back. But koji starter, they're so resilient. If I forget to feed it, and maybe few weeks later, I kind of suddenly remembers, oh, I haven't fed it. They're still alive. They're still alive. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So, what does fascinate you in Koji? Because I have never met anyone who had a qualification in Koji. It's so what it is? What makes it ding for you in Koji?
In Koji, Koji is a real representation of the life cycle.
All right.
Very simple, but it makes lots of things. And when I started making Koji, I really had no idea how to deal with it. But now, I'm still learning. There's so many things I don't know about. But more I understand it as something living, in this very strange world as we are now.
Yeah.
For me, to live with somebody else was actually in its own right, a beautiful thing. Because I think you can start creating a dialogue with them.
Okay.
Because if you do something, they will respond. And they're really, really living. And if they don't like certain thing, they will show it to you. So next time around, you do something else, and they will respond to you. And because it's to get it right, in a sense that you want to achieve the best outcome for your Koji making of your liking. It's a complex thing, so it takes a long time. As with any sort of skilled people in Japan, we are, as a nation, very famous for it. It could take 7 years before you are allowed to make sushi in a counter in sushi bar kind of things. So I think it's a lifelong project for me.
Yeah.
Just it's so fascinating.
Yeah, it's very true. It's very true. Talking about like interaction with it, definitely, it's. I can see it. Yeah. So if people want to read about Koji, how to make things with Koji, what would you recommend as a resources, probably books and things?
Okay, so I've got 3 books in front of me. These books were actually all published around about the same time. So this is Noma Guide to Fermentation.
Yeah.
This is super professional.
Okay.
And not probably too complex for a first timer. And this is another really interesting book called Koji Alchemy by an American author. Really interesting stuff. They're actually focusing on fermentation using Koji with something we have never thought about in Japan, like fermenting beef. Aging beef with Koji.
Okay.
Escalating it with Koji power. Things like that. This is really fascinating. But my recommendation really is this Koji for Life book. It's compared to the other 2 books, and they're relatively small books, and there's lots and lots of photos and lots of tips. Very easy. Good for fast timers, and this book is all about how to make Koji for the first time.
Okay.
And without any fancy equipment. And also it has a recipe for how to make dobroku, white sake, and how to make amazake, how to make miso. So it's really wonderful book. So this is from my sensei, Nakaji.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Would you like to recommend any sake because it's at the end of the episode, sort of like a sake of the episode recommended by guests.
So because I work with lots of sake people, and I get to drink, taste, many different sakes. And there's so many sake I like, but I decided to choose Kokuryu Daiginjo Silk Dragon by Wild Sake because I was working with them to food pair with sea bream shabu shabu.
Oh, interesting. I've never heard about sea bream shabu shabu.
Yeah, sea bream shabu shabu, and it was a perfect match. And what's really making it so special is that the brewery spent years developing the sake with atsukan in mind. So this is a sake for hot sake, to consume hot. My impression of sake consumed hot is normally associated with power, intensity, lots of complexity, funky, But this is so sophisticated. This is really, really delicate. And I was so surprised. So unlike any other sake I had hot, this really was almost mind-blowing. It was a completely different Atsukan world for me. So I liked it very much. And really long-lasting because it's Daiginjo. Premium quality sake. So it has a very complex sort of ginjoka, like bananas, cocoa kind of things, and it's medium bodied, but really, really well balanced, very smooth, but long lasting.
Because it's very interesting because, rule of thumb is if it's ginjo, you should drink it chilled, slightly chilled, or not warm it up. I remember it's usually general recommendation for sake don't. I only come across ginjo sake the brewery was recommending to warm up was some Kameizumi sake. They've got a 3 dots, but ginjo 3 dots sake, and they were recommending to warm it up and drink it warm. So it's quite interesting that it's like daiginjo sake, but it's warm and.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
Thanks a lot, Akemi. If people want to know more about you, where they can find you?
Right, so I've got my Instagram account. It's gohan.london.
Okay.
And my website is the same name, gohan.london.
Okay.
So, yes.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Thanks a lot. It's really fascinating. I'd say it's.
Thank you.
It might seems like a dull topic. Koji, is it one of these kind of things? But it's really sort of things, and you made it so interesting and so I don't know. It's inspiring, I would say, to hear. Yeah. So it's great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wow. When I was talking to Akemi, I didn't notice that we were speaking for more than an hour. So interesting the conversation was. So I hope that time has passed for you very quickly as well. That's it for today. I'll be back with more episodes, but we'll make a break in our sake ingredients series. Because for the topic of yeast, I want to interview a sake brewer who lives and works in Japan, but who is British. Not Philip Harper, but. It's the end of the brewing season, so I hope he will have more time in the next few weeks to record an episode. Next time you are drinking sake, think about the artistry and skills of brewers who mastered the way of controlling those little Koji helpers to achieve exactly what they want with sake. Keep me posted about your discoveries. My email address is alex@sugedama.co.uk, or you can find me on Instagram @sugedama_blog or Twitter @sugedamablog in one word. Look at my website, sugedama.co.uk. I've got a constantly updated tasting notes section and a lot of posts with recommendations about different sake. Or go to London Sake website, any other online sake store, or pop into a wine shop stocking sake or Japanese supermarket. Don't forget that you can get a 10% discount at London Sake website by entering Sugidama, all in caps, at the checkout. Again, if you like the episode and want more, hit the subscribe button. Please, please, please. If you want to support Sugidama podcast, leave a review. Don't wait, just do it now. It only takes a few minutes of your time, but means a really big deal to me. Share this podcast with your friends, with anyone who might ask you about sake, or your social media, chat apps, anywhere. Thanks a lot for listening. Kanpai!
Suge, 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 Sugidama blog. Suge, 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 Sugidama blog.